Hello everyone, my name is Spookydood, and 1 month ago I asked for you guys to send in your Deltarune theories so that I can review them, and I received so many great entries. Today I'm going to be going through 30 whole theories. Welcome to Theory Review 4. Now I know what you're thinking. I changed around the titles and thumbnails of these, didn't I? Yeah, I used to do on the thumbnail 50 theories ranked, 100 theories ranked, 60 theories ranked, but it's going to start to get lost in the shuffle when I release new ones. So, yes, considering everyone really likes them and I've got thousands of theories in my inbox, I'm going to try and make this a more regular occurrence. These will be numbered from now on. Still though, I'll be reviewing several dozen theories each time. So, my name is Spookydood, make sure to like and subscribe. Now let's discuss. Theory 1 is from Chaotic Nodder, and it states that because we're able to duplicate the egg in Asgore's fridge, that is, if you get the egg in Chapter 1, the second egg will be a future chapter or secret boss of some sort in Chapter 5. Basically, the duplicate egg will have some presence inside the Dark World. Personally, I'm going to actually say I don't really think this one is true. Now look, pre-Chapter 3 I would have been totally into this, but Chapters 3 and 4 just gave me a more, how do I put it, story-focused feel, I guess, rather than super hardcore lore-abiding, if you know what I mean. Like, there were so many theories in Chapter 3 that, oh, this is going to turn into an object in the Dark World, this is going to turn into an object in the Dark World, you know, based on objects in Toriel's house. We thought that they were going to give an almost encyclopedic recap of the entire Dreamer history, but none of that happened. None of her objects really turned into anything, and we got no Dreamer lore. In the same way, I think the eggs are going to be a secret as to what they're for until closer to the end of the game, and for that reason, I'm out. I give this one a 5 out of 10. It's not that this can't happen. As a matter of fact, the logic is all there, but I just have this feeling that it won't. Theory 2 is from Grayson, and it states half of the secret bosses in Deltarune seem to be filling in some gap in Undertale, with Spamton Neo being Metaton Neo and Gerson being, well, Gerson, which has led people to assume we will get a Sans pacifist or neutral fight. I don't believe this. What we are really missing is a Papyrus genocide fight, and that'll be the Blue Soul mode fight with the special attack. Personally, I'm not too sure about this. I agree that part of Deltarune is going back to give players things they may have wanted out of Undertale, like a full Metaton Neo fight, an actual fight against Gerson, etc. And looking at Undertale, there are a few things that never ended up happening, but were teased. Papyrus' final attack, a boss fight against Toby Fox, an ultimate powered-up Asgore, and the song that might play when you fight Sans. Now personally, I think all of these could very well happen in Deltarune. I still think both Sans and Papyrus will have quite a bit of time devoted to them towards the end of the game, when we find out exactly how they tie into all the Gaster stuff, and how they eventually get to Undertale. For that reason, I'm giving this theory a 7 out of 10. I'm not entirely sold on it yet, and I don't think that it would come at the cost of a Sans fight. I still think that that's coming, but I think a demonstration of Papyrus' true strength would be pretty cool, and is plausible considering he's being set up throughout the entire game. Theory 3 sent by Jacob suggests that Sham is a plushie made by December for Asriel. In Chapter 4, there's a scene that I think a lot of people overlook. When inspecting Asriel's computer, Susie says, "What is this computer wallpaper? What age did you and your brother draw this at? Glad we didn't go to this cyber world." Hey, and in the corner, that's that cat thing from Castletown. You know, the shop thing, the cat, the Stitch thing, whatever. This is very interesting because it raises some pretty big questions. Consider for 1 minute. This picture was drawn long ago, so it's clearly of Sham. Did Kris and Asriel meet Sham, or was Sham created from their memories? It is mentioned numerous times throughout the chapters that Kris brought home strange objects to play with, including the extension cord that RAM is based on. And I kinda think it was implied that Kris brought home the computer and the playing cards and acted as if they were king and queen. It was kind of up in the air and kind of a weird dialogue thing from Chapter 3, but theoretically speaking, the characters within the Dark Worlds could have originally been thought up by Kris and Asriel. Regardless of your thoughts on this, the theory suggests that Sham was made by December for Asriel. The primary source of evidence comes from Des's belongings, which include frayed yarn and several buttons. The only other instance of yarn or buttons being relevant is with Sham, therefore this could mean that they were a gift created for Asriel. This would actually answer all our questions. Asriel received the gift from December and then drew them on their computer. Hopeless after the loss of Des, Asriel abandoned Sham in the spare classroom. Fueled by Asriel's sense of hopelessness and nihilism, Sham became who they are today. This makes a lot of sense, and only because there's not too much evidence, I'm going to give this one a 6 out of 10. That being said, I really like this theory, and I would not be surprised if it was true. I'd also kinda like if it was true. It's a really good one. Theory 4 is from Yusuf, and I really like the sound of it. Basically, there won't be a secret Shadow Crystal boss in Chapter 5. Instead, it'll be in a mandatory fight. Basically, this allows casual players to know that they missed the previous 4. In the sense that when you fight the Shadow Crystal boss of this chapter in a mandatory fight rather than in a secret fight, you'll get the Shadow Crystal and you'll learn you have to go back to gather the other 4 if you completely missed it. Otherwise, there's a chance you don't know whatsoever that the Shadow Crystals exist if you're a casual player. In the same way that Chapter 3 introduced the weird route through the Mantle quest where it says that the Forbidden Path began with ice magic, giving players a mandatory Shadow Crystal in Chapter 5 against a boss that you must face could demonstrate that the Shadow Crystals need to be collected in the first place. So who would this mandatory boss be that has the Shadow Crystal? Well, this theory suggests that perhaps Asgore might not hold the crystal himself, but he has the Black Shard, a powerful weapon. So then maybe the crystal holder, who could be a flower of some sort, possesses Asgore and gives us the promised no holding back Asgore fight. The prophecy that states that the Flower Man trapped an asylum, that could mean that he's being possessed rather than in a literal physical asylum. Overall, I think this is a really good idea and has lots of potential to, yes, reveal Shadow Crystals to the players while also doing a full Asgore fight. I would give this one a 7 out of 10. Theory 5 is from Harrison, and it suggests that the book in Chapter 4 that talks about a fallen star making rivers with its tears that turn into a glass-like substance is actually referring to December. The explanation is the fallen star is December, who was lured by Friend to hell along with other kids. Suffering and tears is what made the glass-like substance. That substance became the night. The night is using her body while her consciousness is in hell. The scratching noise that she hears is Friend, so Des falls into the depths, or hell, as this theory states. Her suffering and tears made those glass-like substances that formed into the knight's body, right? You know, when you chip the knight's sword, the black shard comes off, and it looks like it's made of the same stuff that the knight is. Therefore, that's the substance. It's made from tears and suffering, and if I might throw my own idea in there, hopelessness maybe, because, you know, hope is so important. So the knight is using Des's body, while her consciousness is still in the depths, so it's not really Des that we've been fighting. Overall, it's a good idea. I think that we've seen several instances of body possession and soul swapping, so it happening to Des makes sense. If Des is the knight, the code dialogue doesn't make sense unless it's another time. Like, if Des is the knight, the dialogue that's currently in the code, where she says, "Where am I? You know, I hear that scratching. Oh, it's been a while." That only makes sense if it's, like, not literal, or if it's not right now, and it's more like just stuff she's said over time since getting lost in the depths. So this does technically answer that. Overall, this is a good idea that makes a lot of sense as to how she became the knight after falling into the depths. I give this one a 6 out of 10. Theory 6 is from Jorhelre, and it's based on a YouTube video by Player Carter. Now, I'm not going to go fully into that video, but I do recommend it. I've seen it, it's very good. Basically, this theory states that the final prophecy panel is that Castletown is going to be destroyed, or banished in some way, that there won't be any more Castletown. The evidence being that Ralsei obviously wouldn't let that happen. When Susie talks about the final prophecy, she says, "I wouldn't let it happen, Kris wouldn't let it happen, you obviously wouldn't let it happen." So that implication is that because it's destroying Castletown. And the other evidence is that Susie, at the end of Chapter 4, and I didn't personally really pick up on this, she doesn't want to go to Castletown. She instead just says, "Let's just go home to your house, to Kris." So this is interesting because it could indicate that she knows Castletown is going to be banished, or that it's supposed to be banished, so that's why she doesn't want to go. She's sort of like dealing with that emotional discovery. Personally, I think the problem with that is that the final prophecy panel is supposed to be a tragedy. Remember, it says, "When all hope is lost for the tale, the final tragedy unveils." It's not really a tragedy, is it? Because if Castletown was destroyed or banished, it would save the worlds, right? And it would save both worlds. So I don't think that the Dark Worlds are going to be destroyed, but Castletown specifically being banished, if it saved both worlds, is that really a tragedy, or is it more so bittersweet? You know what I mean? And also, Ralsei would let that happen. Ralsei has very little self-respect at the current point in the narrative, and I think he doesn't even view himself as a real person. He thinks it's wrong for him to even want anything. So I do think that he would allow that to happen. I do think that he would let Castletown get banished, and I think Susie knows that. I mean, she literally has to step in to tell Tenna that what Ralsei is saying is wrong. Personally, though, I think that narratively it kind of feels right, which is why I sort of have a problem with saying no to this one. Sorry for being so middle of the road with these first few theories, but I have to go 6 out of 10. There's no way to fully debunk this yet, and while I don't think it's going to happen, I think there are better solutions for the final prophecy. You can't tell me that doesn't make sense. That doesn't make perfect sense, especially because right after seeing the prophecy, Susie talks about how she wants these adventures to go on forever, and how Gerson asks Susie how she'd end it, and she says, well, I just keep it going on forever. Like, it makes perfect sense. It's just not as interesting as other options, and I think that it's kind of weird with what we know about Ralsei. Theory 7 is from Is a Good Friend, and it basically suggests that ROM hacking is a part of Deltarune's general theme and has to do with the overall lore of the game. Toby actually got his start with a ROM hack, the Earthbound Halloween hack. It's the first very, very, very well-known Toby Fox game. Well, I say very, 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 but really within the community, I guess it's mostly well-known. That was where Megalovania first debuted. That was, the Earthbound Halloween hack. Now, for those who don't know, ROM hacking is basically, it's not exactly creating a fan game or a new game, and I'm sure I've got some of the terminology wrong here, but it is modifying the original game to be something new, right? I remember when I was younger and I found Super Mario Star Road for the first time. It was like, those dreams that everybody said they have about Mario 64. I had them too. And seeing Mario Star Road for the first time when I was like much younger, I didn't know what it was. I thought like, what is this? This clearly isn't a Nintendo game, but there's a second Mario 64. And it was like this magical thing. And that's what ROM hacking kind of is. It's people who take games that they love and they make their own version of it, their own spin on it, right? And so this theory is basically stating that that's part of Deltarune. Ralsei says that all the fountains reflect the will of their creators. And then in Chapter 3 in the Mantle minigame, there's all this emphasis placed on how the original game is what, the real freedom is at. That's what we want to play, the sword route, the original game. But then there's Tenna's game, that is the modified version of it, where things are different. Then there's also Gaster's Deltarune, when he says at the end of the chapter, my Deltarune, and it's implied that he might be trying to alter the prophecy in some way. So the theory is basically that Deltarune is about remaking something with your love to change the ending. I really like this idea. I think it makes perfect sense. Do I think that it is as literal as, I might be putting it? No, not necessarily. I don't think that Deltarune is going to end and Toby Fox says, well, that was my game about ROM hacking. But you're right that, it does generally line up with what Deltarune is doing. And it does make sense to say that it's about ROM hacking, or that, ROM hacking is sort of an emotional inspiration, you know what I mean? That makes perfect sense. So I'm actually going to give this one an 8 out of 10. I really like this. Theory 8 is from T. Susie is the final tragedy, and will die on all routes of the game no matter what. That's why Ralsei is so focused to change the story. She will sacrifice herself to banish the angel or die trying to stop us in the weird route. That's why Ralsei was so apologetic when she saw the prophecy panel. That's why Ralsei was so shocked that she could be so kind even after seeing that prophecy panel. Ralsei doesn't know Noelle, so it doesn't really make sense for her to be the one that's supposed to die. In my opinion, this is a good theory, and is really only one of 3 options I see happening. Those being, Kris has to die. Go watch my most recent video for why I think Kris might have to die. Susie dies, or Castletown is banished, which I previously mentioned, but have big problems with. I think that this makes sense. I think that, we know that Susie somehow ties into the final prophecy in a very important way, to the point that Ralsei doesn't want her to see it, so this makes perfect sense to me. Overall, I give this one another 8 out of 10. I do think that regardless of her role, whether that's the one who dies, the one who does the killing, the one who, is involved in some way, I do think that she will play a part in the final tragedy either way. Theory 9 is from Jar Jar Binks. Misa thinks Des got lost in the bunker, never to be found for years. This caused her to have deformities, with the shadows creating her current appearance. Misa thinks this would make sense because she's been missing for years. We'll eventually be able to purify her to see her in her normal form. Maybe the sacrifice in the bunker that it was referenced in Chapter 4 is referencing the need for a light essence for the Lighteners to purify her. The overall point of this theory being that staying in the Dark World for years can alter your body and corrupt it with darkness. Misa just speculating. Well, personally, I think this is nutsin'. Overall, I agree that darkness has some role to play in turning Des into some kind of knight-esque form. Not sure exactly the specifics, but if Des was locked in the bunker for years, that could explain her form. However, that would mean that nobody opened the bunker for years, which doesn't necessarily make sense considering Carol can. More likely, in my opinion, is that something happened to Des in the bunker that wasn't just time-related. So, I don't think that it is Des became the knight because she was locked away for so long. It could just be Des became the knight because, she got Gaster-fied, you know what I'm saying? It's possible, and, there is evidence that being in the Dark World for too long could cause some corruption or could do something bad. Like, there's that weird line from Chapter 2 where Sham says that we don't want to be in the Dark World when the sun goes down, and that's like, what? What are you talking about? But otherwise, I don't really think there's enough evidence for it just yet. Lots of people have been in the bunker. Kris has been in the bunker, and nothing has happened to them. Well, I mean, something's happened to them, but they didn't turn into, an evil knight character like Des did. So I think it's something unrelated to just being in the bunker. I'm sorry, Jar Jar. I'm giving this one a 4 out of 10. There's no evidence at the moment that the length of time spent in the Dark World could corrupt someone. Theory 10 is from Artie, and it's actually a theory I wanted to talk about for quite a while. The Titan in the end of Chapter 4 looks a bit like Gaster. If you squint and simplify its details, it resembles his face. It doesn't line up exactly, but it could mean something. I'm actually going to come right out of the gate and give this one a 9 out of 10. I definitely think, I know that many of you have probably seen this image that shows that it's kind of like Gaster's face in terms of the layout. Even if this specific face is not exactly what's meant to be resembled, even if this is even if this is one of those Toby who didn't thought of that meme, images where this is totally accidental, the face beforehand especially, and the general appearance of the Titan is meant to make you think of Gaster in some way. Don't get so caught up on but this doesn't look exactly like Gaster's face. The Titan in general is meant to make you think of Gaster. The face beforehand is meant to make you think of Gaster. It is, quite a coincidence that this just so happens to line up with Gaster's face. Regardless of whether or not this specific theory is right, that, the white and black of the Titan represents the white and black of Gaster's face in some way, the seed in general definitely wants you to think about Gaster. Theory 11 is from Darton. Chapter 5's secret boss is going to be the conspiracy board that we see in Asgore's basement. It'll follow the soul patterns and use the purple soul. It'll have strings on the board that you can move on, that's where the basis for the purple soul comes from. It's going to be tied to hiding in nostalgia or the past. Part of Ralsei's characterization will show him that overthinking things and being tied up in the past is bad. This is a good idea. I don't necessarily think it will just be the board itself, as the last 2 chapters showed us. It doesn't need to be that literal, but I like where you're coming from. It could be a character with the board. It could be Asgore, and it could, the board could play a role in the battle. I like, the idea. I will say that there seems to be a conspiracy board in Carol's house also. That's one that we've seen. So, just throwing it out there that it could also show up in the Holiday House Dark World if that ever happens. But, due to lack of general evidence, I do have to go with a 6 out of 10 for this one. Theory 12 is from Icy Fun. Basically, it states that the colors pink and yellow represent the normal and weird routes. The pink and yellow color scheme is already sort of tied to the weird route in some way. First of all, it's associated with Spamton. It's associated with Image Friend. If the weird route is forcing the prophecy back on track, then pink is equal to Susie as the second hero / normal route, whereas the yellow is associated with Noelle as the second hero and the weird route. This highlights the contrasting themes of friendship versus manipulation. Basically, pink and yellow being this, frequently seen color scheme is basically the balance of the 2 paths here. It's that's the idea of Deltarune, in the same way that Undertale had pacifist or genocide, and you'd see those fan arts or fan sweatshirts and mugs where it's on the one half is good Frisk and on the other half is evil Kara. It's that, where it's that's what pink and yellow represents. It represents the normal and the weird routes. I like this idea a lot, actually. I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. I think that the only thing pink and yellow really can reference, if it's in reference to anything, is Susie and Noelle. because, it hasn't really been used anywhere else as a sort of source, so to speak. Like, the pink and yellow doesn't come from one thing specifically, unless Image Friend is the source, and that all the pink and yellow references are referencing Image Friend. But yeah, no, I like where you're coming from. I think it makes sense. I think that it would be cool. And it's worth bringing up that Undertale used pink and yellow names. Interesting, but, I don't know what to do with it. So yeah, I really like this one. Theory 13 is from Katoded, Antler Headband Theory. So far, we've all assumed the knight is a deer like Carol or Des or Rudy because of the antlers. However, Kris wore a pair of monster horns on a headband in order to feel like they fit in with their family. Therefore, what if the knight is wearing an antlered headband or helmet? Who knows what's truly inside? This is, in my opinion, a better theory than I think most will give it credit for at first glance. Everyone unanimously assumes that Des is the knight. I still definitely think she is, but there's more to it, considering the Kris parallels, which I'll get to a little later. The thing is, the knight's overall form has been called into question. And it's sort of biological in a way, like when it screams and it gets torn apart. But the Chapter 4 scene implies it's also some sort of armor, when Kris imagines Jockington taking off the helmet. So, something could be inside. It could be more of a suit of armor. It could be someone wearing an outfit. And it could be someone other than Des. If Kris imagined Jockington inside the suit, that means that, technically speaking, right, if the helmet was taken off, you know what I'm saying? Like, there's already a precedent set for the antlers to be part of the helmet. But I mean, come on. You know what I mean? Come on. It's gotta be. I think that there's only so many plot twists that can happen before it becomes twists for the sake of it. Therefore, I am going to give this one a 6 out of 10. I do think it's December, and I do think that the antlers are meant to make you, understand, oh, this is December. Or, Carol, if you're not clued in like us hardcore fans. Theory 14 is from Puppy Dog Gaming. It states that Chapter 5 will actually have 2 fountains. Obviously, we all know that Flower King is being heavily implied to be the 5th fountain. However, there is evidence for a second Dark World. The festival. After all, we know that the festival is tomorrow. This theory states that we're going to wake up, Susie will meet us, and then we'll go to the festival. On our way there, we'll stop by the flower shop and Asgore will learn about Sans staying over, prompting him to fly into a fit of jealousy. We'll then arrive at the festival and start to look around, only for Asgore to open a fountain inside Flower King, so we run back there and go through the whole adventure. We return to the festival after the whole sealing of the Dark World, and there is a second fountain in the chapter, the Festival Fountain. I like this idea, and I do think that Chapter 5 will involve the festival, but 2 problems. 1, the timing doesn't really make sense. I think that the festival is a nighttime thing, and won't even come up until after Flower King. If this were to happen, rather than Flower King, the festival, back to Flower King, back to the festival, it would probably just be we go to Flower King, do the Dark World stuff, we go to the festival, and then the Dark World opens up and we do that stuff. Second, I think that this would make it quite a long chapter, and I'm more inclined to say that the Festival Dark World, which might just be the Roaring itself, will be chapters 6 and maybe even 7, considering how built up it's been. Overall, I give this one a 4 out of 10. You're approaching it right, but the specifics just don't line up for me. Theory 15 is from Milo, who says that on the page deltarune.com/code from the sweepstakes, it says listening to Blood Crushers the band, Raise Up Your Bat. This means that Raise Up Your Bat is from Blood Crushers, which is an in-universe movie. This also explains how Tenna had access to the song in Chapter 3. This means that Des didn't write Raise Up Your Bat like so many think. Yeah, I think this one is basically confirmed. It's 10 out of 10. That being said, even though Des didn't write Raise Up Your Bat, it's still relevant, and the lyrics are clearly talking about something that's going on with Des. Like, the lyrics are relevant, you know what I mean? Theory 16 is from Edigo. They say that the constant references to apples are actually referencing the soul, aka the player, as in the apples in-game are meant as a sort of symbol referencing us. This makes much more sense when you start to think of the scenes in-game. The apple-eating scene normally versus the weird route. Remember that weird Gerson apple-eating scene where Kris closes their eyes and Ralsei holds an apple in front of their face. On the normal route, Kris eats the apple with Ralsei holding it in front of them, taking a bite and slowly feeling, forward for more and then eating it. But on the weird route, they sort of freak out and they eat it very fast and then they bite the core and, crack their teeth on it. And so, the reason being the apple is meant to represent us. And on the normal route, they're like sort of a little bit more okay with us. But on the weird route, they're not okay with us. And that makes sense. Kris smells of apples constantly. It's frequently referenced that Kris smells of apples, and that could be an indication that it's a symbol. They smell of apples is like they have us. You know what I mean? Like they not that they smell like us, but like Kris smells of apples because the apples represents the player, and they've got the player. You know what I'm saying? I like this idea a lot. I think even the general shape and colors of apples very much seem to be similar to the soul. There's other theories I've seen, like that apples equal freedom and more. There's not enough evidence yet to say for certain, but I'm giving this one an 8 out of 10 because it definitely seems to be on the right track. This is the only good explanation that I've seen for the weird Gerson apple scene. Theory 17 is from Declan. They bring up a specific line from Chapter 3 in the Egg Room, where one of the 7 flying aces says, "Copies are monochrome." This is in reference to Kris making copies of the ace cards, but coloring them in. Declan's theory states that goners aren't actually their respective characters, but just monochrome copies that are slightly altered. We see this in the Goner Maker, when Gaster was basically making a goner variant of Kris. They're copies, they're fake versions of the original. I'm going to come right out of the gate and say, yeah, 9 out of 10. I agree that after what we've seen, it seems likely that goners are some sort of soulless monochrome copy of the original character. As for how the vessel ties in, I only really have one theory about this. If Kris is destined to die, the vessel could have been Gaster's attempt to alter that fate. So yeah, I really like where you're coming from here. I do think that the line "copies are monochrome," I mean, how do you not read that and think of goners, you know what I'm saying? I think that if it's true that the goners were created, it does raise questions about I almost called it Chapter 1, Undertale, where, so what does that mean? That all the Gaster followers were created by Gaster? Yeah, I really like the theory. Theory 18 was sent by Milson. It states that we'll get to the Chapter 5 Flower King Dark World through Castletown, rather than entering the building regularly. In the left side of Castletown, the wall we originally slid down can be climbed. We'll climb up this wall with our new climbing claws. And through here, we'll eventually make our way to Flower King. Now, I think yes and no. I don't think we'll get to Flower King that way, as there's no real precedent for it, and it's also worth mentioning that the only Dark Worlds we can travel to are those that are physically connected. Like, we can go from Castletown to the Card Kingdom because there was a literal door in between them. The same goes for, like in Chapter 3, the Great Door. We leave the house, you know what I mean, when we go through the Great Door. The Great Door is like a connection between two rooms, but in the Dark World, you know what I mean? It's just a door. That's what the Great Door is in the Dark World, a door. And so I don't really think that there'd just be Flower King that's randomly connected to Castletown. And while I know that your argument here is that Ralsei senses a dark presence and shows up, I still think that that's not normal. You know what I mean? I still think that there's something there relating to how Ralsei works as a darkener that, hasn't really been explained yet. I still think that that's sus. That being said, I do think that we'll go back up there. What's going to be back up there, up that wall in Castletown that we'll probably get up with our climbing claws? Something good probably, because it just seems weird to be an Easter egg. Could it be just a silly little character who's like, oh, you got the climbing claws and you came to find me and I'm the silly NPC? Yeah, maybe, I guess. But I like to think that there's going to be something cool up there. 6 out of 10 for this one. Theory 19 is from I Won't Use This and says that Papyrus will be the Chapter 5 secret boss. Basically, each colored crystal boss has referenced the original user of it. As in, Mettaton Neo was referenced by Spamton Neo, Gerson referenced Undyne, leaving someone to reference either Muffet or Papyrus with the next soul color. The secret bosses all have connections to the party members. Gerson has a very close connection with Susie, Spamton has a very close connection with Kris, therefore, because Papyrus was friends with Flowey and Undertale, he could be friends and have a connection with Ralsei, giving him his own secret boss storyline. Also, if you believe backwards Undertale theory, Chapter 4 was Waterfall, so Chapter 5 will be Snowdin. The secret bosses have increasing connections to Lighteners. Jevil has none, Spamton was a drawing one made, the Knight is some sort of altered Lightener, Gerson is a reincarnated Lightener, so maybe the next one will straight up be a Lightener. Okay, here's my thoughts on this. On the one hand, I like it, because with how beefed up everything is since Undertale, a new Papyrus boss fight with enhanced mechanics that actually features his special attack would be awesome. I also like some of the evidence, specifically your statement that Spamton, Gerson, they tie to Kris and Susie. And so the next one will be another soul color and tied to Ralsei. And, thinking about it, Papyrus makes the best sense there. That being said, there is other evidence I'm not so sold on. The backwards Undertale theory to me does not feel like it's actually intentional, it's just happening by chance. After all, where was Hotland? Also, I think that the secret boss's connections to the Lightners is a bit of a reach as well, in the sense that, Jevel has no connection, Spamton has a little bit, Knight has more, Gerson has more, so the next one's going to be even more, it's just a Lightner. I kind of think that that's a reach. We've had so many of those pattern theories before chapters 3 and 4 that we all thought would be 100% correct, but then the chapters came out and revealed that actually none of those were correct, even the most believable ones like chess theory. Therefore, I don't think that there's enough evidence to believe this, but I think it's a good idea and I hope it happens, so I'm giving it a 5 out of 10. Theory 20 is from Grayson, and okay, Grayson, I'm going to read your theory out loud. It's kind of complicated, but one part of this theory, one specific part, got me thinking a lot, so hear me out. The theory states that Police Chief Asgore goes on a late evening drive when he suddenly hits Des. He goes to Gaster to fix it. Gaster knows about the power that determination has. The Knight is an amalgamate, but it's a Gaster amalgamate rather than an Alphys one, which is why its colors are inverted. Des needs a constant stream of determination to stay alive, and Asgore has been giving her his for some time. That's why the Knight was targeting Undyne and Toriel, because they have a lot of determination. I like parts of this theory a lot. Overall, I'm not 100% sold on your order of events here. I think that there's a fair bit of reaching, and I don't know how involved Gaster was, so I am going to give this theory a 6 out of 10 overall. However, I really like the idea that the Knight needs a constant stream of determination to stay alive. When the Knight was beaming Toriel, maybe that's what it was doing, trying to gather determination from her. After all, we do have an instance of this being implied, that determination can be extracted. Yes, the determination extractor, which just so happens to look a little bit like a deer skull. Perhaps Des is being kept alive in the same way that the amalgamates were from Undertale, through determination. Maybe we'll find out that in the bunker, they've got the determination extractor, and they're using it to keep Des alive. I wonder if they, we have all those references to Kris acting like a zombie. Is it possible that the determination extractor has been used on Kris in the past? You know what I mean? Is it possible, like just scatter brain random thinking here? If it's true that Des is being kept alive through the use of the determination extractor to give her more determination, could it be being used on people? Could that's what the police sacrifice is, right? They've got Undyne down there. They're going to steal her determination and give it to Des, right? I just thinking. They could have used it on characters in the past. It's an interesting thought. That's why it also settled for taking Undyne after trying to take Toriel, which, it clearly didn't expect Undyne to be in the Dark World. So it took her to gather her determination instead. I like that idea a lot, and I think that there's tons of potential for theorizing here. Theory 21 is from IC22487, and it's about the panel in Chapter 4 that says the angel banished will finally meet with its desire. The image underneath this panel is obscured to the player, but we hear the Fun Gang's response to it. What the hell? Is that supposed to be? That's the angel, Susie. What, to my understanding, it actually looks like. I don't know about that, man. Then, in the check dialogue, it's a prophecy. Looking at it made you feel strange. You did not investigate further. The common understanding is that this is referencing the player. The black screen in front of us is meant to make us see our reflection in the screen, therefore making us the angel. However, this theory states that that's actually unlikely, because we're human, so why would the Fun Gang be weirded out by the image? They know what humans look like. Instead, the image could be depicting the angel's desire rather than the angel itself, and Ralsei is misinterpreting this. I'm kind of torn on this. I think that this is definitely meant to imply player-angel theory. That's just what I get from it in terms of vibes. But I agree that it's weird the way they all reacted to it, like it's totally crazy or impossible for the angel to look like this. I like the idea that the picture shows Gaster, which could be our desire, making your theory right. But it just seems convoluted to explain that the picture doesn't actually show the angel, but shows its desire, and Ralsei misinterpreted it. And why would we ever even go back to that picture? Like, that's just unnecessary, in my opinion, a little bit. I think that the more likely option is that it shows the angel, and that is us. I don't see how that could get properly and convincingly explained to the average player. Overall, I'm giving this theory a 5 out of 10. As much as I generally agree with your points, I do kind of feel like it's meant to imply that it shows the player. But if Gaster is the angel, or believes he's the angel, as possibly evidenced by the line, "My Deltarune," maybe it does show him. Maybe he still wrote the prophecy for all we know and considers himself to be the angel. I actually think that would be a very interesting twist, but, Actually, wait a minute. Okay, I'm sorry, off script. In the ending of Chapter 6, he says, "How much longer now, my Deltarune?" And he does say the angel banished will finally meet with its desire. And it's like, finally, right? I mean, there's some emotion in that. What if Gaster thinks he's the angel? What if the prophecy shows Gaster? What if his desire is his Deltarune? What if banishing the angel still means taking him into the Deltarune world? Okay, I was just going back to my old theories. I think that's an interesting idea, though, now that I'm just saying it out loud. Just food for thought. Okay, this one's really interesting. Theory 22. This one's from Postscriptum, and it states that there won't be a Chapter 7. Instead, the ending of Deltarune is meant to be thought of by the player. You create your own ending that you see as canon. Yeah, I know, it sounds crazy, right? After all, Chapter 7 is right there on the Chapter Select screen. But it kind of makes sense when you start to think about the evidence. First off, in Gerson's fight, he talks about Lord of the Hammer and says that there was meant to be a Chapter 7, but it was never written, as it was meant to be finished by the youth. The one ending that's been talked about for so long, therefore, is our ending. The one ending, the one we believe in. We're the youth, and we have to write the ending. Okay, here's the thing. I do kind of think you're on the right track. I definitely think, regardless of whether or not this theory is right, Chapter 7 probably won't be as simple as just playing it after Chapter 6. I think the implication in the Gerson fight is that we'll have to find some way to make it there, to write that ending, perhaps with Susie's white pen of hope. Not like a literal pen, but like Susie's power of hope will get us to Chapter 7. This would mean that we have to do some kind of either post-game meta shenanigans, like I always talk about, or, just access it in the narrative, like some way, remember Channel Chasers with Timmy Turner, where they fought in the credits of a television show? Maybe the Deltarune credits show up and Susie's like, "Oh, we gotta escape the credits and go to Chapter 7. Okay. However, if you're right and there really is no Chapter 7, then I have two thoughts. First off, the weird route could unlock that Chapter 7, giving the game a bad ending that, at the very least, ends it, ruining the ability to choose your own ending. And that would actually give a completely valid, explanation for what the weird route is. It is forcing the game back on the linear narrative. It is refusing the call to write your own ending. That is really interesting, right? I don't know, as I say it, I get the feeling, it's like, oh, that makes sense. The weird route would be, no, I want an ending, I want the tragedy, I want it to be what happens. Whereas the regular ending is, there is no Chapter 7, whatever you imagine, that's what happened. That's what happened in the story, you know what I mean? Your ending is the ending. But my second thought on this is, I don't know, I'd be torn. On the one hand, this is very artistic, and I think that it could be a very cool thing that people remember. It would be the kind of thing that people talk about. Remember when Deltarune ended by not ending and allowed you, the player, to come up with your own ending. But the problem is that that's a bad ending. Objectively speaking, if the game ended and said, what happens in Chapter 7? Well, you figure it out. It's up to you. I don't know how everything could be ended conclusively before then, right? That just sounds like a disappointing ending because there's no ending. It's like, okay, come up with it myself. I could do that for literally any story. I could stop watching Toy Story at the hour 30-minute mark and say okay, well, the last 15 minutes, I'm going to come up with what I think happens. It doesn't mean it's any good or fun to do that. You want to see what happens. That's the point of a story. I can come up with stories, a million stories, but, if I wanted to tell one, your enjoyment of that would be based on my telling of it. You know what I mean? You could at any point think, oh, I know what's going to happen, but you don't, because I'm the only one that knows what's going to happen. So if it's okay, I'm going to stop telling the story now, you figure out the rest, well, that's different. That's not the same story. You know what I'm saying? It's just, as much as it's an artistic thing, and I think it could work, and it's Deltarune, and you come up with your own ending. And in the weird route, you force it to go back onto the implied ending. And, oh, how cool is that? It's well, I wanted an ending of Deltarune. You know what I mean? And I think it's if there was no Chapter 7, it would be disappointing. I don't see a way, because okay, hear me out, right? The point of that would be how does the game end? How do the characters manage to save the day? Well, you have to figure that out. The problem is that means that everything would be inconclusive, that the story arcs wouldn't wrap up properly, that the character arcs wouldn't wrap up properly, that it would be all left for the ending that you figure out yourself. And it's like, well, that sucks, because if the character arcs aren't like resolved by that point, that's stupid. But alternatively, if everything is resolved by that point, if they're like, okay, if Toby's like, okay, I'm doing this chapter 7 artistic decision to allow you to figure out what happens next, well, it's like, okay, I'm gonna do all this. Like, I'm gonna make the game technically end at chapter 6 by having all the character arcs wrap up and have it be it's a satisfying place to end the game. You're not feeling like you're gypped, but you can still come up with your own ending. Well, then it's like, why come up with our own ending? The character arcs are over. The story is over. Like, what else needs to happen besides, like, you know what I'm saying? It's just, I don't think it works personally, because it would just be a little bit disappointing that there's no ending of the game. I have to give this one a 6 out of 10, as I don't think there will straight up be no Chapter 7, but I do think there will be some difficult way to unlock it. That being said, this is a really fun theory. These are the types of theories I love the most, where it's like, wow, what an idea, you know? No Chapter 7. It's a really great idea. It does have merit, right? Like, my frustration with it would just be, they gave us no ending, they pretended it's some kind of artistic thing, but you gave us no ending. It doesn't change the fact that there's no ending to the game, you know? It's, as much as you like to, like, obfuscate it with, like, oh, no, it's an artistic decision. No, there's no ending. There's no ending to the game. And so that's my thought. I'd be one of those, you know, if this happens and everybody's like, wow, what a meaningful ending. You know, you get the video essays, the quiet sadness of Deltarune's non-ending. I'd be the one guy that's like, that was stupid, and you're all going to hate me. So, Theory 23. This one is from Twen Express. Basically, we know that lots of in-universe media is based on the prophecy. Lord of the Hammer, Dragon Blazers, and more are all based on the original prophecy. Understanding this, is it possible that the Mantle minigame, which features the Isles of Northern Light, is also based on the prophecy, with the ending of the Mantle minigame being something that'll actually happen later in the story? That being, in the end of the game, the sword hero comes out of the screen and into a layer of fiction above theirs. They come into the Dark World. What this would mean is, towards the ending of Deltarune, Kris will go from the Light World to one layer up, the device layer, sitting outside the Light World. Actually, I completely agree with this. I'm giving it a 9 out of 10. I think it's a really good idea. I think that if you don't know, the device layer that's what we call the Gaster layer in the beginning of the game, where Gaster's in the depths, and he sort of seems to be above the Light World in some way, on some greater level. And I do think that it's possible that Kris will go to that layer. I think it makes sense that your whole logic about, it's based on the prophecy, and we see the sword character come out of the screen, therefore maybe Kris does that. You know, I don't think they'll come out of the screen and into my desk, because if so, I will scream and get very scared. But I do think that there is a high likelihood that they will, like, go one layer up, like you said. I mean, that was even what Spamton kind of wanted to do, right? So Kris doing it makes sense, and it's already been sort of set up. Theory 24 is from Jolnes. It states that Chapter 5 will reveal what happened to December, as well as much more. The flowers from Asgore's shop will all be Darkeners, and they all know what's going on with Asgore. Asgore probably talks to his flowers about his issues, and in the back of the store he tells these 7 flowers his deepest issues, which will become the personification of the roots of his problems. As the chapter goes on, we'll hear light details of Asgore's life to deeper and deeper topics. By the end, we'll know why December is missing and why he was kicked off the Force. I totally agree with this theory, mostly because I think that we're getting to the point where this knowledge is going to be necessary for the ending of the story to even work. We are about to get to chapters 6 and 7. We have one chapter before then. Yeah, I don't think you realize how crazy that is. We really need to know what happened to December, or at least what everyone thinks happened, as well as what's going on with Asgore and the police force. This is the perfect time to reveal all that, just before doing 6 and 7. 8 out of 10. But, I will say, I was sure that Chapter 3 would give us tons of Toriel lore, and it actually gave us absolutely none of Toriel lore. So for all we know, this could be another case like that. This one is from Vincent, and it's about the names of some files in Chapter 3. Before fighting Tenna, there's a handful of sprites used in the flashback scene when we see the Dreamer and Holiday families sitting together watching TV. The files for these are prefaced by the word sepia, as in sepia brown. That brownish color they're all in is called sepia. One of these files, interesting enough, is called Sepia Knight Sword. Why is this there? It's not used in the flashback scene, after all. Vincent says this is more evidence for Death's Knight. And I kind of have to give this theory an 8 out of 10. Not because I think that, so Vincent's theory is, It's called Sepia Night Sword, and the other Sepia files are the Sepia flashback scene, which is about the holiday and the Dreamers. Therefore, it's evidence. I don't necessarily agree with that logic, but I do think that because it's Sepia Night Sword, it was meant to be used or will be used in a flashback scene of some sort, where we actually see, the knight maybe take form for the first time or something. And because it's a flashback scene, I mean, it's probably going to be about Des, because who else would we even see a flashback scene about? So I disagree with some of your logic, but I agree with your theory overall. Theory 26 is from Wyatt, and it suggests that Image Friend is none other than Sham. Image Friend has connections to almost all the secret bosses. Sham is collecting the crystals with the help of the player. Sham is also seen on Asriel's computer. On top of all of this, making Sham this big twist antagonist that we've been setting up is far more interesting than making Image Friend a completely new thing. Okay, so I get where you're coming from, and I definitely think it could work. I also think it's interesting that in Chapter 4, Susie calls the picture of Sham on Asriel's desktop that cat thing from Castletown. Why have this dialogue? Wouldn't she know their name at this point? Well, perhaps it's to reiterate to the player that Sham is, in fact, a cat. The only problem with this theory is that Sham is pretty nihilistic. They don't seem to think the prophecy can be altered. Also, that prophecy does warn that they are the tale that must not be followed, which seems odd considering they're just a shopkeeper rather than some malicious force. So, if Sham's all nihilistic, right, my point is, it warns us against following the tale of hell, and it tells us we should follow the prophecy. In contrast to each other. So it's follow the prophecy, don't follow the tale. So Sham thinks the prophecy can't be altered, right? So how would that make sense? Sham is not encouraging us to break the prophecy. So that's the big question. If Sham is so nihilistic and doesn't believe the prophecy could be altered, how can he also be this image friend who is supposedly the tale from hell that wants to go down a bad route that alters the prophecy? Well, technically speaking, it could make sense if the altering of the prophecy, if the tale that must not be followed, is referencing him encouraging you to gather the shadow crystals. That is very interesting, and, technically that could work. It could be a cool twist, and I'd like to see how it could play out. I don't really think there's enough evidence so far, but I'm going to give this one a 6 out of 10, but really I do think it deserves higher, because I think that this is a little bit more likely than you think, and it would be pretty exciting, honestly. I think that would be a cool twist. Like I said, the big problem comes with, he's not even doing anything, so how is he the tale that must not be followed? But overall, yeah, it's a good idea. Theory 27. We're getting close now. This one's from Grand Burger Caleb. December, aka the Night, has Kris's original soul. This one's a two-parter and it's really interesting. Basically, there's a variable that checks how long you've been playing as Kris in the code called the Kris Preservation Society. This is important even though it originally seemed like a joke. One of Carol's defining characteristics, as a matter of fact, her only real defining trait at the moment, is the fact that she's big into preservation. She took Noel's snowflakes that were intended for her office at work and took them home to preserve them. She also tells Kris to turn off the Santas before they leave in order to save the batteries. Carol is big on preservation. And what do we know? Well, Kris is working with Des and Carol to do something. We don't know what, but it involves the soul. It seems like Kris needs the soul to live. After all, why keep us around otherwise, even after the weird route? Perhaps this group, Carol, Kris, and Des, is the Kris Preservation Society, whose goal it is to keep them alive. So why are they trying to keep Kris alive? Well, it's because their soul was placed inside the body of December Holiday to keep her alive. That's why the Knight, while clearly not Kris, mimics their movements, their mannerisms, their general style, and why the Knight enemy mirrors Kris's movements in the Mantle minigame. This is what their plan is, to keep Kris alive through the Red Soul's power, while finding a way to bring back Des. Wow, I have to say, this is a really good one. I'm going to give this one a 9 out of 10. It answers so many questions we have pretty well. What's the deal with Kris, Des, Carol team up? Well, they're keeping Kris alive while searching for a way to bring back Des. Why can't Kris get rid of us? They need us to live and they need us to bring back Des. That was their promise to Carol. When Carol says, "Don't forget, Kris, you promised," it is reminding Kris that they can't quit now. While there's definitely a lack of concrete evidence, I think the pieces are all there for this one to end up being correct. Theory 28. This one is from Logan, and it's something I never really thought about until now. But it's a really good theory. The song from the sea is a bad omen. Everyone who has heard the song has mysteriously disappeared. Gerson heard the song as evidenced by his dialogue saying, "Can you hear its song singing from the deep? He's dead." Onion-san heard it and mysteriously vanished the next day. Now at the end of Chapter 4, Susie heard the song. A song that could be an omen, warning that those who hear the song are going to die. Perhaps even Des heard the song prior to her disappearance. I am shocked that I didn't realize this yet. I know that some suggest there is no song from the sea and everyone hears it as hallucinating, but I don't really see the point of that, and I don't think Susie's the type to say she sees 5 lights, if you know what I mean. I think this theory has a very good chance of being true, of being a sort of siren song that spells death for those who hear it. I'm giving this one a 9 out of 10. Really good theory. Theory 29 is from Ricardo, and it states that the save points have different meaning than you think. Gerson says that Susie has the white pen of hope. This links together the concept of hope with the color white. What else is white? The save points. They fill you with a certain power, but it's not determination. They fill your HP. Perhaps that means that HP is hope. Could this mean that Susie will have control over the saves at some point in time with her powers of hope? It's definitely possible. I'm giving this one a full 10 out of 10. I do believe that HP means hope in Deltarune. There's really no reason not to think this. As far as everything else goes, I don't know exactly how this could tie into the future, but I do think it's interesting that Susie is gaining the power to heal people, giving them more hope or HP, which Gerson seems to think is a very important skill for her to learn. Ultimately, I think this will definitely go somewhere. I'm just not sure where yet. I also want to add, very quickly, another user named Amu sent me this theory in their own email, also linking the fact that Rousey has the least HP in the party, paralleling his lack of hope. This is a really good addition, and if I ever post a theory and catch that someone else sent it to me as well, I'll try to mention both people, but it is pretty difficult because I have over 1,000 theories that have been sent to me, so apologies if someone sent a theory that was similar to yours and I covered them but didn't mention it. Theory 30. This one is from...
to unlock your iPhone first.
Nope, not Siri 30. It's Theory 30. Theory 30. This one is from Jackenstein's best friend. It's sort of a complex idea discussing some of the themes of Deltarune overall. The weird route is about forcing Deltarune into a more traditional narrative pathway, in the way so many people thought the base game was going to do, whereas the main route is going to be about finding freedom through creativity and keeping the Dark Worlds around. Basically, the theory states that the main route will continue to involve Rousey downplaying the importance of Darkners, while Susie believes they're important and worthy of keeping alive and treating like real people. The ending is going to make it seem like these worlds need to be banished in order to prevent some terrible tragedy, leading to the false ending of whatever the final tragedy is in the ending of Chapter 4. Only for the true ending to involve Susie overpowering this ending with her hope, leading to some true ending that doesn't exactly work like a traditional story ending. Something that involves narrative freedom or interpretation or ending the game before we can see the ending to keep it alive forever without anything concrete. Very similar to the theory I spoke about earlier, where Chapter 7 will be entirely up to the player's interpretation, except that the point of this would be that Susie subverts the ending and makes some grand statement about storytelling as a whole. There's a large chance that Gaster wants this prophecy followed, and he does not believe there's any way to subvert it, leading to him being the final boss in an attempt to keep us on track. Basically, the theory is that, Chapter 7 will be, the story doesn't have to end one way, there isn't only one ending, we can make our own ending. Susie uses the power of hope to overwrite everything, fighting those who want us to keep on the prophecy. The weird route, then, will be forcing the game back onto a linear path where we follow the prophecy. So basically, it's the reverse of what people thought. People thought that the main route is going to be, there's no choices, your choices don't matter, whereas the weird route is, here's your freedom, you can go do whatever you want, but it's actually the reverse. The main route is going to reveal that at the end of the day, we do have freedom, Susie's choices do matter, whereas the weird route will be making the game back on a linear path, following the prophecy exactly. We won't have choices in that one. We fulfill Gaster's Deltarune in the only way we can, by getting rid of Kris and making Noelle the hero of the prophecy like she's meant to be, and by using our strength to bring about the quote-unquote proper ending, even though this would be a bad ending. We will not make a grand statement about narratives, we will not do anything unique, we will see an ending that could arguably be seen as more satisfying by some than others. I like this theory a lot. I think that I'm going to give this one a 9 out of 10, as it's one of the more creative ways of finding meaning in the weird route that isn't just Genocide Route 2.0. Basically by saying that the weird route is forcing Deltarune back onto that linear path. I think the core of this theory, because it's kind of long and it's a little bit complicated, and some of you might be like, well, what's the point of this theory? I think the point is that, the Weird Route is a traditional story. The Weird Route is a traditional ending. The Weird Route is forcing the story back into the way it's supposed to be. Like, if Deltarune is about a tragedy and about a prophecy that's followed that leads to some kind of horrible thing, but the story is mostly going to be about, about stories and about finding a way to stop that from happening and about subverting it, then the Weird Route is like the original story where it's like, no, we're not going to subvert anything. Here's the story, right? Here's the story you were told you were going to say. Here it is. And yeah, it sucks, bad ending, but that's the story. And you wanted that, didn't you? That's the original story. And yeah, I think it's interesting. And I think that there is a large chance that that could happen, something like that. So, at just about an hour, maybe a little bit less than an hour, we have gone through 30 theories. I really liked them. I think some of my favorites were, I liked the one about No Chapter 7. I thought that one was great. I liked the one with the Kris Preservation Society, talking about Kris giving their soul to Des and everything. I liked the one that Shawm is Image Friend. I think that would be really interesting. I liked them all. Of course, if you have a theory, make sure to send it to spookydoodtheories@gmail.com, and I will review it in a future theory review. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you liked, what theories were your favorite. Let me know your thoughts on any of these theories. If you want to tell me in the comments, I disagree with you completely, Spooky Dude, or I disagree with one of the great people that sent you a theory. Tell me that in the comments, and I will see you next time. My name is Spooky Dude. Thank you for watching, and I already said I'll see you next time. So I'll see you the time after that as well.